Viticulture World answers the age-old question of what if your favorite economic Euro game were cooperative instead of competitive? And the answer? Well, as you might expect. With a new board, some jaunty hats, some tiles, tokens, and a few cards, World retrofits Viticulture into a cooperative game with 7 unique scenarios of varying difficulty that could be played in any or a recommended order. At its core, this is the same game that you've been playing for years. You have the same player mat, the same buildings, the same visitors, plants, wine, and if you choose to play with them, special construction cards. Players assign workers to locations to plant seeds, harvest grapes, make wine, and sell to the bougie elite. The catch is that victory now requires that within 6 rounds, all players have attained 25 points, and the influence token, your farming collective's impact on the regional agriculture and wine trade, has reached 10. Getting to 25 points in 6 rounds is a tall order in any game of Viticulture, and World knows that, which is where it starts giving you tools to overcome this momentous challenge. Unlike classic Viticulture, you'll start with your grande worker and 4 normal-sized workers, 2 wearing yellow hats and 2 wearing blue. This pool of 5 workers are the only workers that you're going to get in the game, outside of the wake-up chart and the possibility of getting a gray worker for the round, and their hats represent their seasonal positions, restricted to either summer or winter worker placement respectively. And rather than accruing new workers, players can upgrade their workers to be used flexibly in either season by removing their hats. I guess dress codes are more or maybe less restrictive for full-time employees, depending on how you look at it. The 2 other major features of World are the event decks and innovations. Event decks represent 6 real-world continents and 1 fictional tutorial mode set in the land of Charterstone, which, given the mixed reception to that game, is a bold world to invoke. But regardless, 1 event deck is used per game, and each round a new event card is revealed, generally giving players some new bonus if they meet some sort of challenge this round. Each have their own systems to work with, from ways of providing bonuses to other players, to overlaying aspects of the board like residual income, the turn order tracker, or point requirements with better versions of themselves. What's nice is that it provides some tension between what you feel you have to do to keep your momentum going and what you can do to score some one-time boon. Not to mention, they're one of the few avenues that you have to increase your influence aside from one of the new worker placement spots on the board. And speaking of overlays, the coolest and most interesting part of the expansion are the innovation tiles. 2 each of action and worker capacity upgrades will be laid out per round, and players can pay to put them permanently into play, upgrading the actions themselves to dramatically better versions, or while not as sexy but possibly much more crucially, upgrading the worker capacity on an action space so as many workers can go to that action as players please, and hatless workers get a nice little bonus whenever they go there. At a costly $4 a pop and requiring a worker to be placed in the Innovate action to purchase these are not cheap, and deciding which, if any, players invest in is a critical and really satisfying aspect of the game. Okay, so here's a couple things that you need to know. 2 of my favorite games of all time are Viticulture and Spirit Island. I love contemplative, thinky economic Euros, as well as dynamic, clockworky, and cooperative games, and for the most part, this does a pretty good job at blending those 2 genres. It's strategic, thoughtful, and brutally challenging, amounting to a surprising amount of collaborative problem solving. Certainly much more than I expected from a, hey, we both gotta get to 25 points game, mainly because players need to jockey for worker placement, and while each player maintains their own money, there's a sort of shared economy with money and actions and card production. But each time that I played, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that even though I was having fun, the thing that was holding Viticulture World back the most was that it's an expansion to a game that was never intended to be played cooperatively. There are so many cool ideas in here, like when placing a grande worker at a spot got shared by another player, you can do some limited trading with them, or the entire innovation tile system. But on the other hand, the event deck seems like some sort of half measure in order to create some suspense in the game. The cards themselves are cool, but at the start of the round, players know all of the information that'll be available that round, aside from maybe some card draw from the decks. So players could literally plan out their entire execution of 1/6 of the game at a time at the start of each round. Which you may be like, Jack, that sounds agonizing. Who's going to do that? You know who's going to do that. We all know someone who's going to do that. Besides, the game invites it. Money, points, influence, it's all so tight, there's no time to be messing around. Additionally, having a strict clock of 6 rounds can be a blessing and a curse. Unlike Spirit Island or Pandemic or any other game where there's effectively a clock by things getting out of whack, but you have a hand in mitigating it, a glimmer of hope that even on the precipice of defeat, if you play it right, you get the right card flip, you can hang on to fight for one more day. Here, you get to round 6, and at the beginning of the round, you know pretty darn well if it's possible to achieve victory, which can really suck the air out of the last 20 minutes of the game. I've had games where we were on the fence and it feels great to have it all come together in the 11th hour, but I've also had games where it's absolutely clear defeat was imminent. And it extends to the components too. The worker hats are a strange, albeit creative solution to restricting workers, but more than a couple times have workers fallen out of their not overly snug hats. And yeah, it's nice that the game came with a few black bordered cards to replace cards from previous content that are incompatible in the cooperative mode, signifying that you just skip those cards if they come up, meaning that you don't have to remember to weed out the deck when you switch from the expansion to classic competitive mode. But it's mildly infuriating that the game boxes and boards aren't even the same dimension, so even if you were inclined to consolidate it down to one box, it ain't gonna happen. Shelf space be damned. So where does that leave me? I can't say that it's a bad experience because I've played it several times now and I've enjoyed it. I'm excited to get it to the table again, but part of that is because it's a new way to play one of my favorite games and I just love co-op so much. Though that same passion is what also highlights what I think are some glaring flaws or missed opportunities with it. But before I let you go, I do want to go over a couple strengths that I think are really worth mentioning. First, Solo is really well designed. The Burano Automa is like your robot pal who, while blocking half the board at the beginning of each season, they also have cash flow and will politely cover some collaborative costs, and is a total bro about hooking you up with stuff when you trade using your Grande worker, and uses their money to satisfy requirements of the event deck, making a very smooth solo experience that doesn't compromise the overall oeuvre of the game at all. Also, the expansion adds new Mamas and Papas, except the Mamas and Papas are switched from red to blue and are shuffled into the original decks and are totally compatible with the original Viticulture, so now you just deal players 2 red cards and 2 blue cards and they can pick whichever coupling they want, allowing non-heteronormative pairings, which is a nice, very welcome, inclusive move. So, it's a mixed bag and one that's hard for me to just outright recommend. If you're a Viticulture diehard or someone who prefers fewer games but more expansions, there's fun to be had in this box. It's creative, challenging, and has a lot of content, but in spite of enjoying exploring Viticulture world, my greatest takeaway of playing this game is that there are a lot of excellent ideas in here that would have been better served if they were in a game designed from the ground up. And that's our review. But I want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite expansions that kind of transcended the entire nature of a game, that transformed it into something that it was never intended to be, but actually executed upon it with excellence? And are you excited to play this? Let us know in the comments below. As always, thanks for your support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being an awesome community. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald.